You just got paid. You look at your bank account and you've got, let's say, $2,847 sitting there. You feel pretty good. You think to yourself, okay, this month I'm actually going to save something. So you transfer $200 to your savings account. You feel responsible. Adult, like you're finally getting your life together. 2 weeks later, your car needs new brakes, $380. Your savings account now has basically nothing that feels meaningful. And you're sitting there thinking, what's even the point? I'm never going to get ahead. I saved for 2 weeks and one car repair completely wiped it out. Why am I even trying? Yeah, let's talk about that. My name is Self-Study, and I spend way too much time thinking about why people who are actually trying to save money still feel like they're failing. If you're someone who's been putting money aside, doing everything right, but still feel like you're getting nowhere, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because here's the thing, saving money doesn't feel pointless because you're bad at it. It feels pointless because nobody explained to you what the first year of saving actually looks like. And once you understand what's really happening, everything changes.
Look, I need you to understand something that almost nobody talks about. For most people in practice, the first $5,000 you save is the hardest money you will ever accumulate in your entire life, and it's not even close. Here's why. Let's say you're saving $200 a month. That's roughly $50 a week. That's real money. I'm not diminishing that. But here's what most people don't realize. At $200 a month, it takes you 25 months to hit $5,000. That's over 2 years. 2 years of discipline, of saying no to things, of packing lunches, of skipping happy hours. And what do you have to show for it? $5,000. Now, I want you to think about what $5,000 actually represents in your life. It's not nothing, but it's also not life-changing. It's not quit your job money. It's not buy a house money. It's not even take a vacation to Europe money, if you're being honest. It's basically my car broke down and I'm not completely screwed money. And this is where people quit. Because the psychological equation in your brain is going, I sacrificed for 2 years straight and all I got was one emergency away from being broke again? Your brain looks at that and goes, this is a terrible return on investment. But here's what your brain is missing, and this is crucial. You're not saving $5,000. You're building a machine. Before we go further, we need to talk about why that first $5,000 feels so impossible to accumulate, and it's because of something I call the emergency tax. According to a 2023 report from the Federal Reserve, 37% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense with cash or its equivalent. 37%. But here's what's even more revealing. Studies suggest that households without emergency savings typically face multiple unexpected expenses per year that exceed $500, on average around 2 to 3 major hits. You know what that means? If you don't have savings, you're basically guaranteed to go into debt or drain whatever you've accumulated. It's not bad luck, it's math. This is why saving feels like pushing a boulder up a hill, because you're not just trying to save, you're trying to save while simultaneously being attacked by random financial emergencies that you have no buffer for. Every time you get $1,000 saved up, something happens. The cat needs to go to the vet, your phone dies, your insurance deductible comes due. The emergency tax is why the first $5,000 takes forever, because you're not actually accumulating $5,000, you're accumulating $5,000 while also absorbing every financial hit that comes your way without debt. You're saving while also paying for the privilege of not having savings. It's the most expensive paradox in personal finance. And nobody tells you this. Everybody just says, build an emergency fund, like it's this straightforward thing. They don't tell you that building your first emergency fund means getting financially punched in the face over and over while you're trying to build it. Now you might be thinking, okay, so saving is hard, thanks for the pep talk.
But stay with me, because this is where it gets really interesting. There is a threshold in personal finance that almost nobody talks about, but once you cross it, everything changes. And that threshold is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 in liquid savings. Here's what happens when you cross that threshold. You stop living emergency to emergency. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you've got $400 saved up, and your car needs a $350 repair. You pay for the repair, and now you've got $50 in your savings account. You're basically starting over. Your savings rate is effectively zero because you're just cycling money in and out based on whatever breaks that month. But let's say you've got $7,000 saved up, and your car needs a $350 repair. You pay for it, and now you've got $6,650. You're annoyed, sure, but you're not devastated. And here's the key. You're still above the emergency threshold. You can absorb the next hit too, and probably the one after that. This is the invisible threshold. Once you cross it, the emergency tax stops applying to you, or at least it applies way less frequently, because now you've got enough buffer that normal life expenses don't reset your progress to zero every single time. And this is when compound interest actually starts to work. Not because the interest rate changed, because your behavior changed. You stop pulling money out. The money actually has time to accumulate, to grow, to compound. A study from the Journal of Consumer Research found that households with at least $5,000 in liquid savings were 60% less likely to take on new high-interest debt over a 12-month period. 60%! Not because they needed less money for emergencies happen to everyone, but because they had enough cushion that they didn't need to borrow at 22% APR every time something went wrong.
Here's what most people don't realize. The reason saving feels pointless at first isn't actually about the money. It's about the identity shift you haven't made yet. When you have no savings, you're living in scarcity mode. Every financial decision is a reaction. The car breaks, you fix it. The bill comes, you pay it. You're playing defense constantly. And in that mode, saving $200 feels like deprivation because you're taking money away from your real life and putting it into this abstract future thing that might help you someday. But once you cross that threshold, once you have that $7,000 or $10,000 buffer, the psychological equation flips. You're no longer a person who's trying to save. You're a person who has savings. That sounds like a stupid semantic difference, but it rewires how you make decisions. Let me give you an example. You're at Target. You see a throw pillow. It's $35. It's cute. It would look great on your couch. When you're living in scarcity mode, the thought process is, I'm trying to save money, but I work hard, I deserve this, I'll just get it. And you do, because what's $35 compared to your insurmountable financial problems? But when you have savings, when you've crossed that threshold, the thought process is different. It's, I could buy this, I have the money, but do I actually want this, or do I want the financial security more? And suddenly, you don't buy it. Not because you can't afford it, but because your priorities have fundamentally changed. This is the shift nobody talks about. Saving money stops being this thing you're forcing yourself to do and starts being protection for the life you're building. The motivation changes from, I should save, to, I don't want to go back to being that person who's one emergency away from panic.
Okay, so you've made it past the threshold. You've got $8,000 in savings, you're still putting in that same $200 a month, but now watch what happens. That $8,000 in a high-yield savings account at 4.5% is generating roughly $30 a month in interest. That doesn't sound like much, but here's what it means. You're no longer saving $200 a month, you're saving $230 a month. You didn't change your behavior at all, but your money is working for you now. Fast forward another year. You're at $10,760, and now you're generating about $40 a month. Your savings rate just increased by 20% without you doing anything. This is what compound interest actually looks like in real life. Not some mythical retirement account 40 years from now. Actual money accumulating faster today. And this is also when you start taking smart risks. Because let me tell you what happens when you have savings. Opportunities start appearing. Your friend starts a side business and needs a $2,000 investment. A course that could boost your career goes on sale. A deeply discounted flight to visit family pops up. When you have no savings, you see these opportunities and think, I wish I could, but I can't. When you have savings, you can say yes to the ones that matter. Here's something that really opened my eyes. Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research shows that households with significant liquid savings, we're talking at least $10,000, tend to earn substantially more income over the following years compared to similar households with minimal savings. Not because having savings magically makes you richer, but because having savings lets you invest in yourself, take strategic risks, and say yes to opportunities that broke people have to pass on. This is the exponential phase. Your money compounds, your opportunities compound, your confidence compounds. But you only get here if you push through the brutal first phase. Look, here's the thing that nobody wants to hear. The point of that first $5,000 isn't the $5,000. The point is becoming the person who can accumulate $5,000. Because here's what I've noticed. People who successfully save their first $5,000 don't stop there. They hit $10,000, then $20,000, then $50,000. Not because they got a massive raise or won the lottery, but because they fundamentally changed who they are. They became someone who saves. And that identity shift compounds faster than any interest rate ever could. You know what the real difference is between someone with $100,000 in savings and someone with $1,000? It's not that the first person makes 100 times more money. Most of the time they don't. The difference is that the person with $100,000 thinks of themselves as a saver, and the person with $1,000 thinks of themselves as someone who's trying to save. One is an identity. The other is a temporary behavior. The first $5,000 feels pointless because you haven't become that person yet. You're still trying on the identity. You're still testing whether this is who you are. And every time an emergency happens, every time you have to dip into savings, your brain gets evidence that maybe you're not a saver after all. Maybe you're just someone who's broke with slightly more steps. But if you push through, if you get to that threshold where emergencies stop resetting you to zero, something clicks. And it's not about the money anymore. It's about proving to yourself that you're the kind of person who can do this, who does do this.
All right, so what do you actually do with this information? First, adjust your expectations. Your goal isn't to save $5,000 as fast as possible. Your goal is to survive the emergency tax long enough to build a buffer. That means your first target isn't $5,000, it's $1,000, then $2,000, then $3,000. You're not building a lump sum, you're building layers of protection, and every layer makes the next layer easier. Second, automate everything. You cannot willpower your way through the first $5,000. You need to make saving the default and spending the active choice. Set up an automatic transfer the day after your paycheck hits. If you don't see the money, you won't miss it. Third, protect your progress and track your trajectory. When you hit $1,000, that's not extra money. That's layer one of your protection system. When an emergency happens, you handle it, replenish the savings, and keep building. Your balance will fluctuate, especially in the first year. That's normal. What matters is the trend line. Are you averaging $150 a month in net savings? $200? That number is your real savings rate, and that's what determines when you cross the threshold. And finally, give yourself credit for the invisible wins. Every month you don't take on new debt is a win. Every emergency you handle without a credit card is a win. Every paycheck where you save anything at all is a win. This journey is harder than anyone admits, and you need to celebrate the progress even when it doesn't feel like enough.
Saving money feels pointless at first because you're measuring the wrong thing. You're measuring dollars when you should be measuring resilience. You're measuring account balances when you should be measuring identity shifts. You're measuring progress in months when you should be measuring it in years. The first $5,000 is supposed to feel impossible. That's not a bug, it's a feature. Because crossing that threshold doesn't just change your bank account, it changes who you are. And once you become someone who saves, someone who has savings, someone who makes financial decisions from a place of abundance instead of scarcity, that's when everything else becomes possible. So if you're 2 months in or 2 years in and it still feels pointless, good, you're right on schedule. Keep going. The threshold is closer than you think. If this video helped you understand why saving feels so hard at first, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more videos about the psychology of money and the math that actually matters, and drop a comment telling me where you are in your savings journey. No judgment, just real talk. Let's figure this out together. I'll see you in the next one.